Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay. I would like to move General Ordinance number 2171 on first reading. An ordinance providing for the implementation in the town of Westfield of the 5-year tax exemption and abatement law pursuant to NJSA 40A 21-1.
May I have a second?
Second, Katz.
Second by Councilman Katz. Any discussion? I think, is this where we went? Steve, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Sure, Mayor, thank you. So on the agenda is the introduction of this ordinance. This is one of the benefits that the governing body can adopt for areas that have been delineated as areas in need of rehabilitation, which you guys have now done for your downtown special improvement district. The way it's drafted, this is what we refer to as the 5-year tax exemption and abatement law. The ordinance can get a little confusing, and that's just a reflection of how confusing the statute itself can be. But generally, it is there are several different variables on how a property owner can go about getting one of these exemptions or improvement, depending on the use of the property, whether it's a single-family dwelling, a multiple dwelling, or construction or an industrial use. The statute breaks the three down. And you can be eligible as a property owner to receive some of those benefits by making improvements to your property, by constructing, making new construction to the property, or by converting another use, a prior use, to one of these three uses. And based upon the value of those improvements, generally it corresponds with the value of the exemption. Not all classes are eligible for abatements as well. But some are. So to give an example without turning this into an hour-long webinar, if the property has a single-family dwelling that is improved on the property and they make improvements to it, the ordinance, which tracks the statute, allows an exemption of up to $25,000 of the value of the improvements. So for example, if the improvements are valued by your tax assessor at $50,000, well, half of that can count as an exemption for the 5-year period. The town benefits because it incentivized the property owner to improve his or her property, which might not otherwise happen. And it gets, for at least the 5-year period, an increase in the assessed value of $25,000. The property owner gets the benefit of saving some tax dollars as a benefit of making an investment in his property and in the town. After that 5-year period, it goes away, the exemption, and in year 6, what the taxes would be due as normal takes effect. So for most of the examples, whether it's a single family or multiple dwelling, all a property owner would need to do is fill out the state form. There's a state form and present it to the tax assessor. It's an automatic approval of that exemption and abatement. For some of the larger projects, the new construction, commercial, industrial, it does require council action and an agreement between the property owner and the governing body. And there's various formulas that can be used to calculate what the exemption and abatement would be. And it's really viewed in a case-by-case basis. But generally, the most common formula that's used is what we refer to as the phase-in. Meaning that once you calculate what the exemption amount is going to be, it phases in over that 5-year period. So in year 1, the property owner is going to be paying whatever the taxes were in the year prior, so the municipality doesn't lose any money, plus 20% of the new value or the improved value. In year 2, it's 40%, then 60%, then 80%, and then by year 6, you're paying the full amount of the assessed value of the property. So that's the skinny of it. Again, don't want to turn this into a webinar, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have. I share in the mayor's thoughts when it was presented to us that this is a great incentive for your downtown businesses to share in the growth and the revitalization of the town and not feel left out. And we gave a presentation, BC, before COVID, it felt like years ago, to the downtown property owners, and they left just elated. There was no opposition to it for the most part that I saw. and all the property owners. And several spoke out that had properties in other towns that have similar type incentives and spoke of its value. So again, happy to answer questions, but that's what this ordinance does.
Thank you, Steve. And on that note, can you talk a bit about how widespread the use of this designation is in municipalities across the state? And is there a certain profile of towns that use this, and how broadly is it used, and by whom typically?
No, rehabilitation differs from redevelopment in some regards. Some regards it's similar, but for example, your area, your downtown area, was delineated solely because of the age of its infrastructure. So in that regard, it's very common in towns with older downtowns like Westfield, and we see it up and down the state, and have been doing it in several different counties with great success, because really there's very little downside for the municipality, for the property owners. Obviously, the property owners opt in if they want to avail themselves of the program, and again, the municipality gets improved properties, property owners to fix up their property, increase the assessed value of the properties, get additional tax revenue during those 5 years, which it otherwise wouldn't, and then in year 6, have the improved value and at its full assessment. So it's pretty common.
Thank you.
Steve, this is Councilman LaGrippo. Some of the residents I've heard from feel this is a sweetheart deal for developers, but residents feel if they improve their own property, they're taxed at a higher rate. So how do you, what's the best way to explain the benefits of what you're doing downtown versus residents who improve their properties receive a tax increase?
Well, just to be clear, obviously, everybody, whether you're residential or your commercial property, has the same tax rate.
Right.
The benefit to the residential owners, even though it may not be direct under this exact ordinance, unless they're obviously residential property owners in the downtown area, are benefiting by having the commercial properties in town have their assessed value increased. So it's spreading out in your budget the onus from residential to those commercial properties. I know in your town you had a recent reevaluation, and that's always a challenge for the downtown properties, and we heard a lot of that at the presentation we gave to them. But when you have commercial properties that are improving their properties and thus the assessed values are going up, that's going to increase their share of the burden of your overall tax liability in town.
So is that,
And I think
safe to say that's 5 years down the road?
Say that again, Councilman?
Is that safe to say it would be 5 years down the road that they would, the residents would see the benefit of the new rate of the tax rate?
Well, no, because the assessed value is going to go up immediately once the improvements are made. It's just that a portion, again, it's not going to be the entire amount of the improvement. The example I gave you before, for single families, it's only up to $25,000. For commercial industrial, for multiple families, it's capped at 30% of the value of the improvements. So it's the value in year 1 of the improvements, the assessed value is going to go up. And for the most part, as I mentioned before, the most common formula that's used is the phase-in. So it goes up incrementally each year.
I think it also speaks to whether or not you believe that a vibrant and revitalized downtown benefits the overall town as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we've seen is that there isn't, the state of our downtown is lacking investment clearly, and there hasn't been anything that spurred their willingness to invest in many cases, upgrading their property. So if this will do that, and can spur activity downtown, I think the entire town will benefit. And people would see that in, ultimately improve property values, et cetera. So, and I think if you made it town-wide, you do run the risk of losing, there are people that are going to make improvements to their town, to their homes, irrespective of this. And then you run the risk as that we would be foregoing tax revenue that we would be otherwise be getting. And I don't think many of us would say that that's what's happening in our downtown.
Yeah, I think, oh, go
I
ahead,
just-
Linda.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Linda,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
I just wanted to clarify too, Councilman, because I think you said that it was benefiting developers. This is actually benefiting downtown property owners and landlords so that they can make improvements, I think, Steve, right, to their properties. In a lot of cases, these old buildings and those investments that are going to be made are going to enhance the landlord's ability to rent their properties to different kinds of businesses, so they can make technology upgrades, they can do all kinds of things that are going to modernize the space and make it more attractive to people who are interested in renting in our downtown.
Yeah, I mean, the primary focus is obviously the current property owners, but that's not to say that somebody couldn't come in, buy the property and take advantage of it. And in fact,
Right.
that may be another benefit of the statute and the ordinance itself, is that it helps some of these property owners sell to somebody with the capital to make the improvements that they otherwise may not be able to do. Another thing that I think is worth pointing out for this discussion is the statute and the ordinance both have safeguards in them to protect against, improvements that are not true improvements, right? So, maintenance costs, the painting of buildings, the refitting of, for a new tenant, the making repairs to a building that were, because of a fire or other casualty that you're using insured proceeds from. Those are all exemptions from what we consider improvements. There are safeguards in place to ensure that these are true improvements that are being made to the property that are going to cause the property to have an increased assessed value.
And attract new
Steve,
tenants, I would think, right?
Oh, of course. that's the public policy. The public policy behind this, when the legislature adopted it, and why so many governing bodies have taken advantage of it, is for just that. It, on one hand, yes, it increases your ratables and increases the assessed value of these properties, but at its core, this is to improve properties. And when you have an improved facade in the downtown, you're attracting more people to shop down there, to walk down there. You're increasing the appearance and street atmosphere of your downtown and making it a true place, which is what planners for years try to do.
Stephen.
I heard from some residents feel that at the end, it's a good thing people are upgrading their property, but there is a feeling out there that the building owner then has the opportunity to get higher rates for rents. So there's I think a little disconnect with some of the folks I've spoken to as far as at the end of the day with the resident. And at the end, it's true what the mayor said, we all do want a vibrant downtown. But some people are feeling, why should a downtown building owner or property owner get a tax break and not me? I don't know if it's just the economic period we're in right now, but that is some of the concerns I've received.
Well, I guess it depends on if you consider it a tax break. I don't consider it a tax break. I consider it a tax incentive, and they're two different things. So I think the majority would agree that we're encouraging them to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. So if I were you, I would tell those residents, it's obviously there hasn't been a willingness to invest in properties, and that's why we are where we are. So and we've never done anything like this. So I think this is that big carrot that ultimately will lift everybody, and including I would hope you're explaining to residents again about the value and benefit of a vibrant downtown to their own personal property values. So it's not a tax break to property owners. It's an incentive really to invest in our community, which benefits all of us.
Stephen, just so I understand it, this abatement program is different from a pilot, correct?
Correct. So this program, you don't actually have an exemption on your taxes. Whatever your taxes are today, you're going to continue paying those taxes going forward, with the exception of, some of the different variables under the ordinance do allow for what's called an abatement, which does temporarily reduce your current assessed value in exchange for the improvements. But a pilot, you're totally exempt. You're paying on an annual basis what referred to as a pilot, payment in lieu of taxes, annual service charges. The difference between the two is mainly who receives or who keeps the funds. So in this example, you're sharing with your county, your school district, your receivables. That's going to continue based on all of your receipts, regardless of what the property is assessed at and what it has exemptions and abatements for. Under a pilot
Right.
scenario, the benefit to the municipality is, of course, you get to keep 95% of the annual service charges, which is obviously the give for the property owner to get the decrease in the annual fees.
Okay, and then so, I'm sorry to interrupt. And then so based on the phased-in formula, the town will begin to see tax revenue in the first year. So 20% of the improvement, 40%, and on and on and on. And then that's tax revenue that's shared among all the different departments that require that receive a portion of those funds, right?
Absolutely. Again, you're not going to be reducing your tax base here. You're only going to be adding to it incrementally. And again, the phase-in is the most common method. There are a couple of other methods, but even in all of those, you're going to still see your tax revenue increase incrementally. In year 6, of course, it will be at the true value.
All right, and so this is really just a way for the downtown business owners, whether they are the downtown property owners, whether they currently own the property or whether they purchase it sometime in the future. It just allows them to share in the redevelopment of the downtown, to kind of share in the burden and the investment in redeveloping our downtown, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like,
Does this include, just a quick question, Steve, does this include sidewalks?
Well, no. It depends on whose property the sidewalks are.
Well, I mean, they're the property owners' responsibility. So,
Yeah,
it could potentially. Right?
Well, it really depends, because fixing the sidewalks wouldn't really be considered an improvement. It'd be considered maintenance of what's there. So it may not be considered an improvement to improve the value of the property. It's something we could look at if it's a unique circumstance where you're adding or changing what was previously there rather than maintaining it.
We all good? So want to vote on this?
Yeah, just real quick, so going forward, some outside building owners outside the city wondering why they weren't included in.
I think when we had talked about it is that because this hadn't been done before, we thought we would do it in an area that was most easily controlled. And there's no reason, if we feel like we've seen some success for this, that we couldn't look at expanding it to other places. Like I said, but we thought, as having the first time ever, let's see where we go. And if there's, and we'll evaluate based upon what the demand is and who's taking advantage of it. But there's no reason why we couldn't consider expanding it if this proves to be successful. Okay, so where's Tara? So you want to call the roll?
Councilwoman Habgood,
Yes.
Councilman Parmalee,
Yes.
Councilman LaGrippo,
No.
Councilman Katz,
yes.
Councilwoman Mackey,
Yes.
Councilman Contract,
Yes.
Councilman Dardia,
Yes.
Councilman Boyce,
Yes.
Mayor Brindle.
Yes, this motion has